Chrissy and Bradley, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
I loved the book. We're talking about When I Talk to God, I Talk About You. It's written by Chrissy Metz and Bradley Collins, you guys, of course, illustrated by Lisa Fields. I look forward to reading this to my 7-year-old. That's how much I like it. It's full of colorful illustrations, just a great message. What led you guys to want to write this? Why write a children's book about prayer?
Well, I think for me, prayer was always really important. My grandmother instilled that at a very young age. And it really has, thankfully, stuck with me throughout my whole life. And to this day, I do it all the time. I mean, hundreds of times a day, probably. And it just means a lot to me. And I know it meant a lot to Bradley. And we sort of talked about like what helped us when we were kids, or what helps us when we're scared, or when we're uncertain about what's going to happen, or during the pandemic when we met, like nobody knew what in the world was going to happen. And that's really how we sort of talked about writing the children's book, was because even if you don't pray, or even if you're not religious, I think everybody was praying and sort of just sitting in like uncertainty and fear about what was it going to mean for our world and for our families and for our friends. And we wanted to bring that and impart that to young readers, because I know for me that was always very helpful, having that at such a young age, but also just sort of destigmatizing what prayer is, and having that real conversation in the book, as the readers will see, is that whomever's reading the book, that when I talk to God, I talk about you, and I talk about, all the things, and also reiterating to the kids that like you can talk to God too. And that's really what prayer is a conversation with God. So that's really sort of the inspiration and the reason why we decided to do it, and we thought it was so important.
Yeah, for me, I very, very young, around the age that this book is for, my grandfather was very sick. And I remember thinking, well, what can I do? And am I allowed to pray? Do I know what to say? Am I allowed to talk to this higher power and ask for help and guidance? And just, mainly I was praying for his health and my family to feel better about it all. And he ended up passing when I was in 8th grade, but there's about 4 or 5 years there. I just didn't know what I was doing, or if I was doing it right, or if I could, or if I should. So this book, for me, answered a lot of those questions. That yes, you can pray for your friends, you can pray for your pets, you can pray for your grandparents, and whatever you have to say, whatever you have to ask, it's okay, and you can have a relationship with God like that.
Amen to that. It celebrates kindness. I thought that was so cool. It's not just a book about prayer. That's the main focus, right. But it has a funny picture of a kind skunk handing I think a squirrel an acorn, or an acorn, depends on where you're from, how you pronounce it.
Wherever you're from, right.
Acorn, huh? And the end of the book shows pictures of animals sleeping. This quote really got me. It said, the book says, "Your prayers are heard day or night. God's by your side, a warm, safe light." And I think that's so important to teach kids how prayer, brings comfort and healing, like you guys were saying. So are you guys hoping that, children through this book will, be introduced to prayer and just learn the simplicity of it? Because I think too often, like you guys said, we make it too complicated when it's just
Yeah, it becomes really complex, and we think that we have to do it in a particular place in the house, or a particular time, or just at bedtime. And I do it all the time. I mean, morning, noon, night, and in between. And when you sort of demystify what it is, you really start to create an actual relationship with God. And I think that's really special, because, you don't have a friendship with a friend if you don't call them. Right? So like, you got to call your friend, which means you can call them when you're on the playground, or with your friends, or on a trip, or, God forbid, if there's somebody sick in your family, like there's no right time to contact and to feel your connection with your higher power. So that's also something that I feel is important to reiterate to kids, or even to introduce them to, because I think even parents feel like, oh gosh, this is such a massive concept. How in the world do I begin? And even simplifying the words in the book were a challenge for us, because we know we have to simplify it, keep simplifying it, and just get to the bare bones of what it is, which is just a relationship and a conversation with God.
Right, and the warm, safe light is illustrated through the fireflies, which are around you, and they're small and they're faint, but they're there, which is the same way we feel about God being involved, looking over us in our lives. So that's what that line, came from.
The book illustrated. Sorry, Bradley. The book encourages parents to pray for their children. I think it kind of reflects what they're already doing in many cases, and it encourages children to pray as well. I love how the book ends with photos of. So the book for those who haven't read it, it goes through the day. It begins in the morning, I think, with a bird in the morning, and a picture of a bird and an egg, and then by the end of the book, you see these peaceful animals sleeping. I was wanting to sleep. I was reading it a second ago. I was wanting to go take a nap after reading it. It's so peaceful.
Oh.
But the book ends with photos of those animals sleeping with these calming words. Tonight, as you sleep, so cozy and still, God hears your prayers and always will. I'm curious, have you guys grown in your prayer walk as you've grown into adulthood and matured?
Oh yeah, for sure. As I was saying, my grandmother, we always went to church together and prayed, and she was always very religious, and that was always so helpful for me. And there were times and seasons where I didn't surrender and trust to asking God, or thanking God, or living in gratitude. And for me, that gratitude is so important. And there, 9 times out of 10, every morning I'll wake up and I just sit in gratitude, or I just find 5 to 10 things that I'm grateful for. And that can even be a prayer, because it's not always asking God for something. It's not always, wanting something. It's really also a conversation of gratitude and just thanking you. And, before we get in the car, we go anywhere, we always talk about traveling mercies. Or if I get on a plane, if we take a trip, if my family takes a trip, like if I have a friend who's, interviewing for a new job, whatever it is, I'm always sort of, it doesn't always have to be about you. It can be about other people. It could be about gratitude. And that definitely has evolved, obviously, into my adulthood as we understand concepts in a bigger way. But I think that that's something that, it ebbs and flows. But then when you are, I feel, when I'm grounded in that gratitude, but also the prayer and thinking of others, like it's this really beautiful cyclical energy in this collective consciousness between us people and even animals and, the world and nature. Like we're all connected. So that definitely has evolved as I've gotten older.
Gratitude for bringing people together like you guys. I mean, that's God's hand is over all of us and is watching us and is guiding our actions. Yeah. Chrissy, I met you on the set of Breakthrough, and you were talking then how the story had impacted you. I'm curious, looking back on that moment when you made Breakthrough, how did that impact your personal faith, if at all? I'm assuming it did, some at least.
Oh yeah, it definitely affirmed for me the things that I believed and what I was raised with. And that miracles do exist, whether you're religious or not, whether you believe in God or not. Like, I truly believe that miracles exist. And especially with John and Joyce's story, I still can't believe that it's a true story. When I tell people about the movie or they share their story with me, I'm like, it's unbelievable to me. So yeah, it just, for me, affirms that miracles exist. God really is real, and this higher power is really real and is really taking care of us. And even when we don't think so, even when we don't get the job or we don't get, fill in the blank. I always say that your rejection is God's protection. So all of it together just affirmed for me that what I believed is real, because how else can you explain it? Like scientifically you couldn't explain it, and people were trying to find, the loopholes and the holes in the story. And I'm like, no, y'all, this is a real story. And then to see, John's life flourish, and now he's married and has a baby, and he wants to be a pastor, all of these beautiful ripple effects. So,
Yeah, that scene when in Breakthrough, the scene where you're in there praying, you think the boy's dad, your character thinks the boy's dad. I mean, that's one of the most powerful scenes I've ever seen in a film. I mean, it brings tears to my eyes every time I watch it.
That was the first scene we did in the movie. That was, woo! Yeah, I'll never forget that.
Yes. Final question for you. Is there anything else that you guys want parents to take away from this book? I mean, how do you guys see this book being used? I guess bedtime story is a great time for it.
Yeah, I think, I don't mean to interrupt you.
No, go ahead.
It's so important for that connectivity between a parent, biological or not, or a mentor or a sibling, to just sort of sit with the other person and have that time at bedtime or a quiet time, and maybe have a conversation. Maybe you don't even finish reading the book. Maybe the child asks, oh, wait, how do I do this? Or can you help me or teach me how to do this? Like, that would be the hope for us, is that, yes, it's a beautiful book and it's beautifully illustrated and it feels inclusive with the animals, and everybody is important and a part of, but also maybe it brings up conversation with whatever relationship is reading the book to who, and also that it could influence even parents. I know that Bradley and I talked about a lot of inner child stuff coming up when we were writing the book, and I taught preschool. I have a big family, but there are things that I didn't realize that I didn't hear growing up, or that I would love to have been reiterated about, things and emotions. And hopefully it'll touch parents just as much as the children, but that it creates a conversation and a connective tissue between that relationship. We're always on our phones, we're on the TV, we're, all the other ways that we can be distracted, but how can we have a real conversation and connect the dots in our family, relationships? I think that is a hope for us.
Right. It was very healing for us to write the book. So I think parents are going to get a lot out of it too, for things that we just didn't hear, like Chrissy said, when we were children. And it answers a lot of questions about, what was I thinking when I was a child? And it made me go back and think about, okay, my grandfather was sick. What was I feeling? What were those emotions and that helpless feeling? And writing the book and reading it, even now, it helps me feel like I was a lot less helpless and a lot more in tune with where my heart should have been then. And it helps me.
Yeah, I think it's really nice as a child, to hear that you're wanted and you're valued and you're loved and you were desired.
You're asked to be here.
Yeah.
You were wanted here.
You're wanted here, and that's not something I think a lot of kids hear or a lot of people have heard. And I do always say that when you treat the soil, that's really where, as cheesy as it sounds, that children are the future, and they are, very important in the future of this world and our society and our culture and everything. So hopefully it has a ripple effect and it impacts not only the kids, but the parents, but people who read it. And we also ended up being so inspired that we wrote an album to accompany the book. So that's coming out very soon, which is very exciting. We pulled different words and phrases from the book and wrote songs about them. And, my nieces and nephews, it's been approved by them, and they're singing a little bit with us on a couple of the songs, which was really special. And yeah, we're excited
about it. Yeah, that album is called "Prayed for This Day."
Okay.
And it's going to have similar artwork to the book, but it complements the book. We were thinking, you read the the book to the child or yourself before bed, and then the album will send you to sleep.
Yeah.
You know, it's a lullaby album, Christian lullaby album. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I've always thought that, for years, I've thought that the best books are children's books because they simplify subjects and they get to the bare. And that's what you guys have done. It's just a conversation with God. And it also, you mentioned a second ago, children having a purpose. It talks about children having a purpose and a plan. I love that as well. Congratulations. I really enjoyed the book.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
The book is When I Talk to God, I Talk About You. It's written by Chrissy Metz and Bradley Collins, who are our guests today. Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you.